This weekend, Dr. Sleep, the follow-up to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, hits theaters. So today I'm going to stop and rank both Shining movies plus the 90s miniseries from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of the 3 Shining stories that we have thus far. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. I'll tell you right up front, a bunch of you are going to disagree with my ranking today. That's cool. One real quick thing before we get started, you can download the audiobook of either Dr. Sleep or The Shining for free at the link down below, audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler, if you sign up for a free trial of Audible. Audible has a massive library of hundreds of thousands of books to choose from. I'm a massive fan of Audible because I like to read with my ears a lot more than I like to read with my eyes, and both The Shining and Dr. Sleep are quite different in the book than they are from the movie, so they're worth checking out. You can get one of them for free if you sign up for that free trial at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. With that said, let's get started. Coming in last place is Stephen King's The Shining, the 1990s mini-series. So it's well documented that Stephen King was not a fan of Stanley Kubrick's version of The Shining, and as audience members that can seem kind of strange because obviously Stanley Kubrick is a legendary filmmaker, but you have to keep in mind Stephen King wrote a book that was very personal to him, and Stanley Kubrick changed a bunch of the things that were very personal to Stephen King, thus frustrating legendary author Stephen King. So, move forward to the 90s, there was a series of hit adaptations of his books that were miniseries on TV, and they decided, hey, why don't we actually do Stephen King's version of The Shining? He even wrote the script for it. So naturally, this adaptation of the book is much more of a direct translation of the book to the screen with as few changes as is possible. It touches on a bunch of themes about alcoholism, a lot more of Jack's past, kind of the issues he was working towards, kind of his fighting of everything that was going on with him. And in doing so, it does kind of touch on some things that weren't present in the film version. But, yeah, this thing hasn't aged very well for a number of different reasons. It's tough to know how this would be perceived in time if we didn't have Stanley Kubrick's film already existing before this came out as a point of comparison, but Stanley Kubrick directed his version of the film, and this is directed by the guy that directed Critters 2. Kubrick's version of the story stars Jack Nicholson, legendary Hollywood icon with many, many awards on his shelf. The miniseries has Steven Weber from the 90s sitcom Wings. While it might be a more faithful adaptation of Stephen King's work, the pedigree of talent behind and in front of the camera is just not the same as it was in Stanley Kubrick's film. And you just kind of see that throughout the entire film as, you know, have sequences where they're trying to demonstrate how Danny is seeing things inside of it, and it's just so on the nose with low budget special effects that it looks laughably bad whenever they do this stuff. Like very early on in the film, Danny sees his imaginary friend that is kind of the manifestation of The Shining, Tony, in front of him, and it's just laughably bad what they're showing as there's like this ghost figure standing outside right in front of him. The look of everything is kind of overly lit throughout the entire film. And just in general, as a telling of this story, it feels too long because it is such a translation of a book to the screen that everything is stretched out. And so scenes that should be about 2 minutes are like 8 minutes long of dialogue, of just people kind of going back and forth. When you put all the pieces together, it's an interesting thing to exist if you're a big fan of The Shining and want to see this alternate version of it that's more faithful. In and of itself, it's not particularly good. Our runner-up is Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Please please don't murder me down in the comments. I'm in no way disrespecting Stanley Kubrick's work or anything like that. This is an entirely subjective list. I'll give you my reasons why. I'm fully aware it's a classic, and I'm in no way going to attack it on any grounds of that level. So here, Stanley Kubrick crafts one of the most meticulously created psychological horror films ever made. If you have ever seen any sort of documentary about the making of this film, it's just bonkers the level of detail that Stanley Kubrick put into every single scene, the framing of every shot, the Easter eggs, the hidden meanings, the ties back to different things, references to stuff with the moon landing. I mean, it is kind of bonkers how much stuff is jam-packed into this movie. Add to that, you've of course got Jack Nicholson, this icon of Hollywood, fantastic actor, and the thing he's fantastic at is playing crazy people in a story with legendary Hollywood director Stanley Kubrick making a story about a guy going crazy while up in this kind of haunted hotel. Who can do that better than Jack Nicholson? Of course, making Jack Torrance one of the icons of horror, whether the memorable lines, the scenes of him chopping through a door, the here's Johnny, all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. Like, so many things about it are so legendary, or now kind of in the meme world, the final shot of him frozen in the hedge maze kind of becoming an icon of memedom. Then it's also just a classic example of kind of one of these slow burn stories that starts out simple enough with a family going off to this hotel, and then you just keep seeing the tension build, like tightening a string on a guitar, just waiting for it to snap as you go throughout the movie, and things get weirder and stranger, and he gets crazier and angrier and more violent as it goes along, leading up to kind of this bonkers third act as Wendy starts to fully see everything happening, and we're even getting guys in bear costumes and stuff like that. I mean, just classic slow burn psychological horror. All the reasons you might want to yell at me right now for not having this in first place, I totally get it. Like, I know exactly what you're saying. But here's the deal. I've said this before on my channel. Stanley Kubrick and I feel like we operate on different wavelengths. I can look at what he's doing. I can respect it. I can be like, wow, there's brilliance in what he's doing. But that's not the way that my brain is wired. That's not the way that I connect with film, storytelling. And so I can watch it and respect all the things going on, observe them, and be like, I love the fact that other people really resonate with this film. As for me, that's just not really my experience watching this film. I don't watch it and just have this wow, big emotional connection to it and just amazed. Like, I don't feel what you feel while you're watching this film because I just don't operate on that same wavelength. A lot of that is I'm pretty concrete in the way that I like stories to play out. I'm not a big fan of metaphoric storytelling, ambiguity as to what's happening. Things like that just normally kind of frustrate me more. Things that, like, you might watch it and think, oh, I just love that there's all these interpretations. What's your theories about what's going on with this? Did you notice these Easter eggs? And there's also this inside. Things that a bunch of other people love. I respect that, but that's not stuff that when I watch it, I just fall in love with the movie more. Things like the final shot frustrate me more than they excite me about the different interpretations as to what they could possibly mean. So I know it's a classic and I put it in second, but that's my honest ranking. But coming in first place is Dr. Sleep. Whereas I don't really feel like I'm on the same wavelength as Kubrick, I very much was on the wavelength with what Flanagan was doing with Dr. Sleep. Thematically, structurally, storytellingly, I think I made up a new word. This is much more how I connect with stories, films, and characters. It's a far more traditional good versus evil narrative. The conflict is more direct, the interpretation is more clear, and the themes are more bluntly stated. And for me, those are all positives. If you're familiar with my channel, you probably know that I'm a big fan of superhero movies, and this one kind of functions a little bit like Stephen King's superhero movie. You've got the horror, the gruesomeness, people with powers, you've got demons, you've got serial killers, and then you have good people with superpowers trying to stop them. So superheroes, supervillains, and a bunch of Stephen King type stuff. And this type of story, I think, is a really cool way to expand the mythology that started in The Shining. How do you take that and not just repeat it, rehash it, do the same thing? It takes the mythology and opens it up to the whole world. Whereas The Shining, self-contained, claustrophobic story set in the Overlook, this one goes out to the whole world and has a showdown at the end at the Overlook. But honestly, where this one hits me a lot harder than Stanley Kubrick's The Shining is when you start digging into the themes of it, and the idea is the exploration of alcoholism, the relationships between fathers and sons, really this whole journey of Danny throughout this film and how it mirrors Jack from the first film. I just found all of that very profound, especially as the film goes along. It starts becoming more clear what they're going for and showing the differences between the two of them, showing the similarities between the two of them, doing things that even help you see Jack in a different light. I've mentioned this many times before on my channel, but my father was an alcoholic growing up, and he drank himself to death when I was 20 years old. And then as an adult, I found myself as an alcoholic myself. When I started this YouTube channel, I was in treatment for alcoholism. And so a bunch of the things inside of this movie kind of really resonated with me and were quite profound and powerful for me. And that's where for me, this movie can even get elevated above a classic. I can fully respect what Kubrick was doing, but what's the movie that really said something to me, touched something within my life experience? That's what cinema's supposed to do. Move you emotionally, help you experience things, and think differently about life. And Dr. Sleep did that for me on a far deeper and greater level than did The Shining. So you've got a story and storytelling that are a bit more on my wavelength. You've got some fantastic actors giving some really cool performances, especially Rebecca Ferguson. Then you've got some themes and character arcs that very much resonated with my personal experience. Put that all together, and for me, Dr. Sleep comes in at number 1. Remember, you can get the audiobook of Dr. Sleep or The Shining for free at the link down below, audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. If you sign up for a free trial of Audible, I do highly recommend it. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.